Hello, my friends. Okay, so this is the planetary weather update for Leo rising. You could read for your Leo if you're a Leo sun or a Leo moon, but I suggest people listen for their rising sign because it's more accurate. Okay, so the overview of what I'm talking about is basically July 21st through 24th, where we have a lot of action happening. So we're going to look at Jupiter's last hurrah with Venus. What does that mean for you? The full moon in Aquarius, and then moving forward from that, where Jupiter is going after that. There's some movement happening here this week. Okay, so for Leo rising, Jupiter has been in your 8th house of other people's money, spouses' money, other money coming from government, taxes, inheritances, or possibly debts owed to you or you owe someone else. And it doesn't have to be financial, possibly. Mostly it could, but it could be something bigger, something about power. That's where Jupiter has been hanging out for about a couple months in that place for you. And Jupiter is the planet of expansion, of opportunity, of luck, of options, of possibilities, of more, of expanding things and having more. So right now, Jupiter is in his favorite place, one of his favorite places in Pisces. That's very good. He can do more of his job because it's his home. He has all of his tools. It's his favorite place to be. He's about to move into, because he's going retrograde right now, he's about to regress back into Aquarius. And that means he will be going into your 7th house of partners and partnerships, relationships. But more on that later. Jupiter going into backing into the sign of Aquarius isn't terrible, but he kind of loses all of his really great power. And these are kind of the last days here of Jupiter living it up in Pisces. And he just so happens to be having this kind of amazing party of sorts with Venus on, let's see, that's Wednesday and Thursday, basically, of this week. So the 21st, the 22nd. And that means they will be, Jupiter and Venus will be in an opposition. So an opposition usually is an aspect that's a hard aspect. But with two benefics, like Jupiter and Venus, it's not really the end of the world. You're not going to have like war. You might have, I went overboard and ate too much or spent too much or something like that. So Venus opposing Jupiter, that is happening, your 8th house of other people's money, spouse's money, and then Venus will be just this week moving into your 2nd house of your money, of your assets, of your possessions. That's pretty good. You want that. You want a happy, benefic planet. Venus is the planet of love, of beauty, of pleasures, or how we see pleasure in the world, how we give and receive it. It can be about money or about just values. Okay, so Venus is in your 2nd house of your money, your assets. Jupiter expanding things in your place of other people's money. And they're in this opposition, kind of a helpful relationship, expansion of beauty and values. It could go a little too far where the dreaminess or the, it's okay, let's just do more kind of attitude takes over, and that could be like the dark side of Venus and Jupiter together, where like Venus in Virgo is like fact-based and like kind of about like bettering yourself, maybe with health food or like details or like perfectionism and a natural state of order or beauty. And like Jupiter is the cohesion, the bigness, but kind of going on faith, like let's let go and let God. It'll work out. Just trust in the universe. Like we have to know that these signs are showing us the way. So there's kind of a balance to have happen there. If it's not balanced, it could go overboard with like, I ate way too much, I spent way too much, I overextended myself to someone, or like we just met and we are getting married tomorrow. That's like what you want to avoid here with Venus, Jupiter. But all in all, it's a great vibe. It's like warm feelings, indulgences, expansion of relationships, luxury. It could be extravagance, but it could go into that conceited, too much of a good thing, materialism. So just watch out for that. That's the 21st, 22nd. But that's really like Jupiter is having a great time here. It's Jupiter and Venus. Okay, great. So, and with those money houses with you, obviously I would pay attention to not spending too much. Or if someone is overpromising you, or seems too good to be true, or you're overpromising, or just taking advantage of a situation that it's just like all that glitters is not gold. I mean, it can be, but just tone it down a little bit. And I would say then that like Jupiter having its last hurrah there is really, it will be back. It will be back to that 8th house place of other people's money and spouses' money, but it will be a while. It will not be back to that place until literally December 28th or something, like so New Year's Eve, around that time, Jupiter will come back to that place of spouses' money and expanding that area. But as for now, Jupiter will be reversing. He is reversing, and it will, I think by next week, be into your 7th house, because Jupiter will go into Aquarius. Aquarius is, again, not like his greatest place. In the 7th house, Jupiter in the 7th house, though, is kind of amazing. Like Jupiter's expanding the area of relationships, partners, one-on-one relationship, like a business or romantic relationship. So that's good, and I can talk about that at another time. But it's interesting because Jupiter going back into Aquarius, going into that 7th house, we say, oh, okay, so what's going on in that 7th house? Well, a lot for you. Okay, the 7th house right now is completely packed with Saturn. Saturn has been sitting there since last December, like December of 2020. And that is putting a bit more responsibility or heaviness, or like, I got to do this hard work, or constricting or restricting vibes, or a sense of duty, and like a lot of work, a lot of not a lot of fun. Saturn is like, we've got to do the work. We have to, there's a lot of red tape sometimes, or just something that's obstructing or stopping or being kind of a lockdown vibe in that 7th house of relationships. So Jupiter going back in is like, okay, great. We have help now. We have more options. Jupiter is saying like, yeah, but look at this. Like we have this. Why are we not looking at this? Look at all of these options. So that's really good. And it just so happens that this full moon coming up on Friday is in Aquarius. So that full moon is happening in your 7th house of relationships. So it's like, okay, the Saturn stuff that has been sitting there for a while, been very lit up the past, let's say, since last end of June, beginning of July, all of this July, with all the Mars stuff coming through, and basically the Mars-Uranus-Saturn conundrum that we've been in, that has been lit up and been agitating that 7th house of relationships, and possibly from your 1st house of self, saying, I have this whole new identity. I want to bust out. I forget these people. I want to do this. And Uranus in your 10th of career and public standing is like, we have to do this. This is pushing through. There's change happening in that area of life. And so that whole like conundrum has been brewing, and we kind of had a pleasant moment last week with Venus and Mars meeting and being like, okay, let's come to a sense of compromise here. It's going to be okay. We can do this. And the Aquarius full moon here with Saturn in that 7th is kind of like, yeah, but there's like, let's look back at what doesn't work, or what the work that we still need to do. That we still need to look at this work that needs to happen in the 7th house. And that full moon, because it's emotional, it's the full moon, it's coming to a head, things building to this pressure point and kind of this harvest point. It's kind of harvesting the fact that we've still got Saturn sitting here, and we really still have that T-square with Uranus and Mars. Well, Mars is moving out of the picture, but the square between Saturn and Uranus is still there, and it will be there next year, most of next year. So we can't neglect that, and it's kind of time to refocus, maybe downshift and bring it back, because we have stuff going on in the 7th house of partners that needs to be looked at. So I feel that this full moon, it will be not as maybe intense as the past full moons because it doesn't have a bunch of crap tied to it, but it is right there with Saturn, and it's like, yeah, remember the stuff that you have to do over here? Hi. So that's what is happening that full moon Friday, Leo rising, and but you will have that kind of party vibe of the Wednesday Thursday vibe with the Venus Jupiter, or yeah, the Venus Jupiter expansion, and maybe going overboard with those money houses. I would just keep it in check, like really just stop and say, do I need to eat this much, drink this much, spend this much, overextend myself with some vow of love? Maybe not right now. And then, you know, because Jupiter is then downshifting itself back into that house of like Saturn sitting there and there's work to be done and we have to get into this. So like I said, Jupiter will eventually go direct and then make its way back into Pisces, but that will be by New Year's, basically, New Year's Eve. So this is kind of Jupiter's last hurrah, like keep it in check, don't go overboard. Full moon should bring you some insight into things that need to still be worked on in that place of relationship. And Jupiter is coming in to say, okay, I'm here, like I'm going to help as best as I can, and we're going to make this happen with some sort of more opportunity, more a bigger lay of the land opening up, because before, you know, it was just Saturn just being like this lead kind of weight. Jupiter's kind of lightening things up now in that house. Okay, so this is way too long, but it's okay, and that is what I wanted to say. Yeah, that is what I wanted to say for Leo rising, and I will be back next week with another update, and we're going to talk about, well, you'll see what happens then. Okay, thank you.